UFC 317. If you're an MMA fan, you have been wondering what the main event of this will be for a while. Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev, Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones, and as of a week ago, we found out that it will probably be neither. It's probably going to be Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev until just about a few hours ago when it was reported that Dricus du Plessis is actually injured and will not be able to compete at UFC 317. Real quick, if you're an MMA fan, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I make daily content, and we're trying to hit 800 subscribers by the end of the year. So let's get straight into it though. Obviously, with this information, a lot of people are going to want to fight Khamzat Chimaev for a vacant belt. You know, not a vacant belt, an interim belt. And Caio Borralho was one of the ones who was willing to step in. You know, he volunteered himself. He said he knows someone who is able to fight, and obviously it was him. So Caio Borralho was immediately one of the main guys that would be willing to step in against Khamzat Chimaev for the interim middleweight title. And in terms of that matchup, I don't know how I would actually like it. You know, I would not like that as the main event of UFC 317. You know, I would like it as maybe a CoMain Event or some other card. But this is International Fight Week. You know, the UFC has always stacked these International Fight Week cards. UFC 290 was stacked. UFC 303 was stacked before all the cancellations. And UFC 317, it's not even going to be stacked to start off with. You know, Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall and Ilia Topuria versus Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev should clearly be the main event of this card. You know, maybe we could have got both of those on the same card, but the UFC just does not like us enough to give us that. I don't even think that's that hard of an ask. The UFC should have gave us those two mega fights on the same card. Easily would have been one of the biggest cards ever. But instead, we're stuck with Caio Borralho versus Khamzat Chimaev as our headliner for this card. So it's really just disappointing. In terms of how I think this fight would actually go, I think Khamzat Chimaev would just dominate him, dude. I'd love to say that Caio Borralho, you know, I don't know, man, he might put up a decent shot. But it's Khamzat Chimaev, dude. Every time I've doubted Khamzat Chimaev, I doubted him against Gilbert Burns. I doubted him against Kamaru Usman. I doubted him against Robert Whittaker. And what did he do to all of those guys? He dominated them, dude. I can't stop doubting Khamzat Chimaev, and I'm especially not going to pick against him, against a guy who's really never fought any good competitors. You know, Caio Borralho's best win is a Jared Cannonier, and even then, that fight was very back and forth. I know Cannonier's no slump, but, you know, Cannonier was piecing up Borralho at some points in that fight. You got to remember that. I just don't know. I'd love to say that Caio Borralho is going to be able to put a decent fight up, but it's Khamzat Chimaev, dude. Khamzat Chimaev, I can't doubt his cardio anymore. You know, maybe it's not the best, but he doesn't need cardio if he's just going to come out there and finish you in the first round. And I think Caio Borralho is going to put up a decent fight for like the first 2 rounds, and then Khamzat Chimaev is just going to submit him. It's not going to be that close. But in terms of other things that we have confirmed, or not confirmed, but rumored for UFC 317, the co-main event of this card will probably be Alessandro Pantoja versus Kai Kara France, you know, and that's just another fight that's like, okay, that's a decent fight, but is it really UFC 317 International Fight Week worthy? No, it's not. And I understand the props of the UFC for not actually headlining a card with this, but it's still not the best of a fight. I don't even know if Kai Kara France is that deserving of a title shot. You know, I think there's many more flyweight contenders who are much more deserving of this, like Minov, like Bren. But obviously, it's okay because Kai Kara France has never technically fought Alessandro Pantoja in the UFC. I know they fought on the Ultimate Fighter, but technically that doesn't count as the UFC. So I think that's really the only reason they're doing it. And if we're doing MMA math, Alessandro Pantoja went to war with Steve Erceg, and Kai Kara France knocked out Steve Erceg in a round. So it's a little bit of MMA math questioning there. But still, dude, Kai Kara France shouldn't be here. And there's a lot of talk about how Alessandro Pantoja is above 35, dude. The 35 and over curse might affect Pantoja here, dude. I'm not a superstitious guy, and I don't think Pantoja will have any effects, dude. I just think Pantoja is so incredibly well-rounded. And when we're talking about Pantoja, we got to start talking about this guy like he's just behind Demetrius Johnson, because he has 3 title defenses in less than a year. He's cleared up pretty much all of the flyweight division, and Pantoja is just no slump, dude. This kid's good. And I know his age is a little bit older, but I still can see him dominating the flyweight division for a couple more years, which would actually kill the flyweight division, but that's a topic for another video. The next thing I want to talk about is another fight announced for this card pretty much. Bren versus Minov. Obviously, this fight was booked a couple months ago, but Bren had to pull out due to injury, and Alsumo Ambabayev stepped in. And this fight has pretty much been rebooked, pretty much confirmed for this card. I do think this is a fun fight. It'll definitely add on to UFC 317. It'll make it a more decent card. Obviously, it is a #1 contenders fight. And I think both of these guys arguably deserve a title shot more than Kaikar France. I'm not very fond of Kaikar France, but in terms of the actual matchup, I do like this matchup. You know, Minov Cop is very quick, very precise, and he is a tricky customer to deal with. And Bren Reval, he's literally a mini Nate Diaz. He's coming off 2 wins, dude. He beat Bren Moreno, and he beat Tatsuro Taira. I think both of those fights he was an underdog in. So props to this guy, dude. And it's just an awkward situation for Bren Reval because obviously he's lost to the champion 2 times already. So can you really give him a trilogy fight when you've lost to the same guy 2 times? Obviously, Minov Cop has fought against Alessandro Pantoja on tough, but still, it's just a fresher matchup if Minov Cop wins. So I would really hope if Minov Cop could win. I think Minov Cop's a fun fighter. You know, a lot of people don't like him because of the amount of eye pokes he had in his last fight against Also Amabayev. I still like Minov Cop. I think this would be a very fun fight and definitely add on to UFC 317, make it a better card overall. And one more thing I want to talk about for today's video is we maybe do have an update for Tom Aspenol versus Jon Jones. I'll play the clip what Tom Aspenol said earlier.
I know everyone wants fight news. But I do know what's happening. I have had meetings with the UFC, as we know. I have been sworn to secrecy for a little bit. So stay tuned, stay up with the channels, stay up with the UFC channels, of course, as always, as you guys always do. But there will be news coming, hopefully, very, very soon. But if you're going to ask me, I can't give the answer right now. But stay tuned, it's coming, it's coming.
So Tom Aspenol did come out and say that he has something confirmed. He knows what's going to happen, but he can't announce it to the public. They've literally probably begged Tom Aspenol to keep quiet about this. And the way he said it, he knows what's going to happen. He didn't say it's going to be like a fight with Jon Jones, or he didn't even hint to that. That kind of tells me that we're going to get a Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspenol maybe. I can just see Jon Jones retiring, and for the vacant belt we get Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspenol. But if that fight doesn't happen and we actually do get Tom Aspenol versus Jon Jones, that would be huge, and I do think we should have got that at UFC 317, but that's looking like it's not going to be the case. This fight obviously is still a mega fight, and I still really do care about this fight, even though it's been delayed so much and just forgotten about, you really. But I would love this fight if it happened, and I think this fight needs to happen. Tom Aspenol versus Jon Jones. We'll probably get this fight a little bit later in the year if it does happen. And yeah, man, that's good to hear that we have some updates on the actual Tom Aspenol situation. You know, Tom Aspenol is actually the only one giving updates on this, dude. Dana White's not telling us anything. No one else is telling us anything except Tom Aspenol on his YouTube channel. So thank you, Tom. And yeah, man, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. MMA Outpost out.